Stonks withdrawal rates Ramsey. Dave Ramsey. What do all these have in common? Personal finance. Loud budgeting has been the most recent personal finance trend on TikTok. And it basically means you just don't spend money when you don't need to. But instead of doing it subconsciously and keeping it to yourself, you need to clear your crispy vocal cords and scream at the top of your lungs every time your friends try to guilt trip you into grabbing a Chipotle burrito bowl. Loud budgeting should just be common sense to everyone. Well, except the screaming part. We're all adults here. No need to make people feel bad. Just punch them in the neck. Having something so simple become a trend made thyself wonder. How did we get here? Where are we going? What is going on here? Let me out! I searched all over the internet, I read a bunch of websites, analyzed a bunch of graphs, and studied a bunch of research papers. I laughed and I cried, and now you will too. My goal is to get you to cry, and I will do that. I made a PowerPoint about the history of modern day personal finance. 8000 BC. Before croissant. The earliest instance of accounting is noted in Mesopotamia. Obviously, they didn't have the save as button back then. These are fossil spreadsheets. Or it was like a clay tablet. They recorded their goods, what they traded, their expenses, and even loans. They created f***ing loans. They were like very advanced for their time. Like they were the cool kid table in high school, and the rest of the world was like a pencil sharpener. And I'm not talking about the good sharpeners, like the automatic ones or the ones that had the matte black finish and were greased up with jet oil or something because they rotated so smoothly. No, more like the ones you had to use your whole body to turn, making you feel like you're working at a factory during the Industrial Revolution. What was I saying? Oh, they were advanced, okay? 770 BC, a shiny small circle was invented. They called it a coin? More like Bitcoin. No. Did you know it cost 2.7 cents to make a penny and 10.4 cents to make one of them fat nickels? But a dime costs only 5 cents. The more you know. 600 BC, the first official coin currency is rizzed into the world. I might have to cut that one. 600 BC, the first official coin currency is cummed into the world. There were other currencies at that time like the Mesopotamian shekel, but it wasn't like an official minted currency. Anyway, this made Lydia like one of the richest empires of that time because they made trading internally and with other regions like super duper fruper easy. 600-ish AD, after Dorito, banknotes swooshed into the scene in China. And then about 600 years later, paper money. So people can finally say, give me that pepper. Other countries were aware that China was using paper money, but they decided to stick with coins until about 1600 because they really liked how shiny they were and that they could roll really good. Just kidding, it was because Europeans used brute force to take over land that was not theirs, giving them more sources for the metals they needed to create these coins. Who needs paper money when you have guns? Then at one point people were like, hey, I'm kind of getting tired of carrying around a bunch of metal in my trousers. Can we come up with like a better solution, like maybe a complimentary backpack? Or just f***ing use paper money? And so in 1695, the Bank of England said, well, sure, we've been meaning to try out this new fractional reserve banking thing anyway and forever put the world in never-ending debt. Let's do it. Banks started to give out banknotes, which were pretty much like modern day paper cash, and they also gave them out as loans. Wow. Now keep in mind, back then there weren't any finance books, money managers, or even savings accounts. If people wanted to save money, they buried it with a shovel in the ground. And do you know what the interest rate on that is? It's nothing. It's f***ing dirt. Also, all finance knowledge came from friends and family. There was no one preaching what potato field to invest in this quarter. The first official financial advice came from Benny, the Franklin, in 1737 when he wrote hints for those that would be rich. A penny saved is a penny earned. He didn't say that. He actually said a penny saved is 2 pence clear, which doesn't make any sense nowadays, but without it, we probably wouldn't have a Dave Ramsey or a Graham Stephan or a Grant Cardone. Well, not that last one. Grant Cardone's philosophy is more like a penny saved, oh, f that penny, throw it away, go learn sales and sell a jet, and then 10x that commission somehow. In 1765, the first savings bank, or a bank that takes deposits and pays interest on them, opened in Brumath. As in, bruh, I never learned how to math. Because it's 1765. 1782, the first commercial bank opened in the US, the Bank of North America. And still no one knew anything about money, and the banks in the US didn't even start paying interest on deposits till like 1816, when a bunch of poor boys gathered at the town hall in Boston and were like, dude, we gotta do like a vibe check real quick, cause we straight getting finessed by all these woke Rizzlers. They making all the dough and we ain't getting no drip. A bit sus if you ask me. We should like soft launch our own guap house and get a little cheddar knowledge. Haha, bet. Yeet, brother. Fucking sheesh, my man. And so the Provident Institution for Savings in Boston was open. The founders had the idea that a savings bank would provide an opportunity for the less fortunate to securely store their money and make a little bit of a profit. The Provident encouraged everyone to keep their money in the bank instead of spending it all on like a new choker or something, because apparently back then everyone would rather look like the Pillsbury Doughboy than let anyone see their greasy neck beards. Ugh. Or a squirrel. They had pet squirrels back then, also with chokers. The Provident did this by providing dividends, or a small return on the savings. This was a huge change because this was one of the first instances where financial experts were offering advice to the middle and lower class. In 1849, James, the first finance guru Gilmart, entered the chat. He published one of the first personal finance articles. In it, he dropped some serious bars, like when you have money in your pocket, you're anxious to find reasons for spending it. Then when you have placed that money in the bank, you will be anxious to find reasons to not spend it. He also said, wealth is evil. You cannot escape anxiety and shillings. In the mid-19th century, I hate saying it like that because when I say 19th century, in my head I'm thinking 1900s, but it's not. It's the 1800s. I have to do mental jujitsu when I talk like this. Why is language the way that it... Anyway, mid-19th century, bucket shops pop up all over the US, which were like casinos for stocks and commodities. They allowed people to make short-term bets on companies, grain, oil, chickens, lions, tigers, and bears, and oh my god, everybody's losing their money. Oh look, blue jeans. In the 1870s, investment advice manuals started to gain popularity. They focused on providing practical information for short-term stock trading, or nowadays known as day trading. These manuals had three major impacts on the world of financial advice. They made the argument that day trading is more skill and science rather than gambling. They also argued different viewpoints on trading regulations, like whether or not your average Pop-Tart could invest their entire fortune in Enron on December 1st, 2001. This is probably part of the reason why today you can't day trade if you have less than $25,000. And also these manuals idealize the personality someone has to have to be a successful investor, a rationally and emotionally detached individual, or a cold, sad boy. Bank records during this time show that low-income memesters understood the importance of savings because they would contribute a decent chunk of their income into their savings accounts, between 4 and 10%. Now, the accuracy of the data from the 1800s is obviously questionable, especially since there was like a max of 1,000 people surveyed each year. But it's still a little data point that we should all cherish, because without it, nothing would really change. This is kind of little. Some would argue that the increase in the amount of people using savings accounts back then contributed to the growing economy, because the banks would take the money and reinvest it in growing private and public projects. Or in other words, the more money people gave to the banks, the more cool stuff got built, the closer they got to living on the moon. At least that's what they thought. Well, actually, I don't know what they thought. I don't even know if they believed in the moon back then. Late 1800s, there's a movement to teach kiddos to save pennies and nickels, and that saving money was more of a virtue. But I think it's because toys back then were horrendous. You would rather play with some coins than have that thing stare at you while you sleep. Also, child labor. As these gamers grew up, saving became part of their nature. They would save as much as they can from each paycheck and taught their little gamers to do the same. Now, important to point out that back then it was probably easier to save, or at least psychologically, because they didn't have a bunch of marketing crap shoved down their throats while they scrolled their phone for 12 hours a day. Because they worked for 12 hours a day. Remember child labor? They didn't have time to watch ads about smart toasters or whatever the heck that thing is, or Kanye try to sell you his shoes in one of the most controversial Super Bowl commercials because people couldn't figure out whether it was simply genius or just Kanye being Kanye, aka simply genius. In the year 1900, only about 1% of Americans held stocks and bonds. However, there was like a jimbo load of financial writings at that time, like the financial advice manuals, stockbroker memoirs, and even a little bit of fan fiction. Much more people were going bonkers for money than just 1%, but they weren't being recorded because they were investing at the bucket shops. Cough, cough, they were gambling addicts. Since the US didn't want no broke-ass bitches, they made bucket shops illegal, as in against the law, as in go on, get 1902, a man with a plan, Charles H. Dow, as in down, girl, we got index funds for everyone, chill. Published the Dow theory in the Wall Street Journal. This was a small step for Charles, but a double stair step for mankind. I mean, the world of analyzing stocks. Wait, no, I mean finance gurus. This was a large step for finance gurus. Dow's main point was that the stock market has short, medium, and long-term trends happening at the same exact time, and that it's up to the investor to capitalize on it. After Dow's writings, a bunch of new investment writers entered chat in the 1920s. The two that are probably most known today are William, give me 10% of your salary and I will tell you what stocks will go up, Gann, and Ralph, I like cosmology, Elliott. Dow laid down the soil and William and Ralph fertilized it. No, wait. Dow made the batter, and William and Ralph put it in the oven. No, wait. Dow created an intelligent way to analyze the fluctuations in the stock market, and William and Ralph it. William basically said that the history of the stock market is the best way to predict the future, and cut your losses quickly and let your profits run, or buy low, sell high. And Ralph basically said, look around you, bro. The universe, that's the real stock market. Observe and ye shall be rich, my good sir. Both of these dudes wrote some books that are still in use today by some stock analysts, fanboys, and 15-year-old stock experts on TikTok. In 1914, the Smith-Lever Act was established. The main point of it was to connect farmers to university researchers to improve agriculture, blah, blah, blah. But it also allowed universities to teach personal finance. What was actually part of home economics, or FCS, family and consumer. Son of a bitch, I have to pay for college to learn about personal finance? Hazel Kirk, a real G in developing the discipline of home economics, with her personal finance research at the University of Chicago in the 1920s. People started to understand how important financial knowledge was in living a happy, healthy, and GG life. In fact, there was a spike in the phrase personal finance in the writings at that time. People were all about saving that chedda, forever. By 1929, about 25% of Americans held corporate stocks, and about 1.5 million, or 1.2%, traded them. 50s and 60s of the 1950s and 60s. Congress was like, maybe it's important for people to learn how to manage money? Cringe? So there was a load of policy initiatives to fund research in financial management, budgeting, saving, income allocation, consumer expenditures, and oh my God, did we forget to research efficient ways to properly implement this in schools where kids can actually remember and apply what they learned? What are you looking at me for? I don't know, just give them a textbook or something. So states began mandating some form of personal finance and economics in public middle schools and high schools. Now, important to point out, just for your information, that before this, private programs like the Junior Achievement Organization or the Council for Economic Education were providing financial education on an after-school basis for those that were interested. And better yet, it was free. Real estate. 1997, the idea of financial literacy was pushed to the public by the Jumpstart Coalition of Personal Finance. Ooh, a dollar sign. They finally gave the people what they were waiting for, a definition for the phrase financial literacy. The ability to use knowledge and skills to manage one's financial resources effectively for the lifetime financial security. Okay, now that was their definition. Since then, stocks, bonds, mortgages, compound interest, inflation, diversification, credit scores, and even Shrek lore have been added to financial literacy. In the early 2000s, the United States government noticed a pattern of poor financial decisions by the average consumer. They were just buying houses because the banks would give them as many as they want. What? Michael Scott with blonde hair? What? So in 2010, Mr. Dr. President Obama created the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or as they like to call themselves, the CFPB. Call a friend, please, because I never learned how to money, even though it's 2010. And one of the things they were supposed to do is develop a strategy to improve the financial literacy of consumers. And they did this by creating a website that has info about some common financial topics, like loans, credit cards, and tax evasion? What?
We got him.
Damn it! The effect this education has had on the overall consumer financial literacy is questionable. However, they do claim that over 60 million people have got their financial questions answered. Either way, this is still a free resource that everyone has access to. Unless you can't afford internet because no one ever taught you how to budget. Well, this can't teach you how to budget either, but you know who can? Mr. YouTube and Mrs. Investopedia, and their adopted kid who won't shut the f up, TikTok Jr. Which brings me to today, when most people get their financial information from doing a Google search or YouTube, or accidentally stumbling across something while they're scrolling through their endless void of short-form content. Either way, there's more financial content available nowadays than at any point in history. However, the sad boy part is that almost nothing has changed. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, the savings rate in the 1870s was 4 to 10%. And looking at the consumer savings rate over the last 60 years shows a decline in the amount of dough people put under their wet mattress. There's a lot of economical factors at play. I understand that. But the main point I'm trying to f***ing blue shell over here is that the financial education in secondary schools is not working. Am I gonna do anything about that? No, and you're probably not either. Okay, that's it. If you like what you saw, like and subscribe.
The rat goes like this, like this, like this. You are now a normal rat.